Before we start, if you enjoy the story, please leave a like and check if you're subscribed. The volcanic ash tasted like rust and burnt bone. Dax Harrow spat it out for the third time since the transport dropped him on Ashfall Reach, his boots crunching through the black sand that covered everything on this God's forsaken rock. The Drakhi forward base rose from the wasteland like a fortress of obsidian and steel, all sharp angles and aggressive architecture that screamed territorial dominance. Every warrior he passed stopped to stare. 7. 8 feet of scaled muscle wrapped in armor that looked like it had been forged from the bones of things that died screaming. He felt their contempt like heat on his skin, too small, too soft, too human. Dax had stopped caring what people thought about his size, around the same time he'd stopped counting how many things bigger than him he'd killed. The war chamber smelled of copper and something chemical he couldn't place. The walls were decorated with skulls, some humanoid, some decidedly not, mounted between banners marked with glyphs he couldn't read. At the center of the room, standing beside a holographic tactical display that painted her face in blue light, was war chieftain Azura. She turned as he entered, and Dax felt the full weight of her attention settle on him like a physical thing. 7.5 feet of predator wrapped in blackened metal and bone armor. Azure scales caught the light as she moved, making her skin seem to shift between shades of deep ocean blue. Her horns swept back from her skull in a magnificent crown, ridged and deadly, fading from dark blue to bone white at the tips. Golden eyes tracked him with the lazy interest of something that had never been prey in its entire life. She looked at him for 3 seconds. Then she laughed. It wasn't polite. It wasn't restrained. It was the full-throated sound of genuine amusement, her head tilting back as her lips pulled away from teeth that could tear through Kevlar. "This is the human they sent to protect me?" Her voice carried the weight of authority and something else, mockery so pure it was almost an art form. Dax set his rifle case down with deliberate care and met her eyes without flinching. "Sergeant Dax Harrow, I'm here to keep you breathing whether you find that funny or not." "Sergeant," she repeated, drawing out the word like she was tasting it. She circled him slowly, her armored boots silent despite her size. "You're what? 5'9"? 5'10"? Barely more than 170 pounds with all that equipment?" 5'11", Dax said flatly, "and I weigh 180, most of it scar tissue." She stopped in front of him, close enough that he had to tilt his head back to maintain eye contact. Up close, he could see the fine patterns in her scales, the way they overlapped like natural armor. She smelled like heated stone and something sharper, ozone mixed with cinnamon. "I have killed things 3 times your size with my bare hands," Azura said softly, her voice losing its amusement. "I have led my warriors through 17 campaigns without losing a single engagement. What exactly do you think you can protect me from that I cannot handle myself?" Dax pulled a photograph from his vest pocket, creased, stained with old blood, and held it up. It showed a creature that might have been reptilian once, before something had torn it in half. Literally, ribs splayed out like broken fingers, organs scattered across black sand. "That was 12 feet tall and armored like a tank," he said. "Killed 6 soldiers before I got to it. Took me 4 minutes." Azura's eyes flicked to the photograph, then back to his face. Something shifted in her expression, not respect, but the beginning of curiosity. "What did you use? Plasma charges? Antimatter rounds?" "My hands," Dax said, pocketing the photograph, "and a lot of anger management issues." Before Azura could respond, another Drakhi warrior entered, taller than her, with crimson scales and a face marked by ritual scarring. He spoke in their language, harsh syllables that sounded like grinding stone, but his eyes kept sliding to Dax with undisguised hostility. "General Corvin says the Strategic Council begins in 10 minutes, Azura said, switching back to human standard. "You will accompany me. Try not to embarrass yourself by dying." The meeting room was carved into the volcanic rock itself, exposed to the ash-choked sky through a retractable roof, currently sealed against the wind. 20 figures gathered around a central projection. Human commanders in tactical gear, Drakhi warriors in ceremonial armor. The air felt charged with the kind of tension that came from people who didn't quite trust each other, planning how to stay alive together. Dax positioned himself against the wall behind Azura, his eyes moving constantly. Exits, sightlines, weapons, blind spots, old habits that had kept him breathing when better soldiers died. He saw the movement 3 seconds before anyone else. Not saw, felt. A shift in air pressure, a wrongness in the volcanic haze filtering through the ventilation. His body reacted before his brain finished processing, shoulder slamming into Azura's armored back with enough force to send her stumbling forward. The Skrell came through the ceiling like a meteor wrapped in knives. 12 feet of armored nightmare, blade-tipped limbs that moved too fast for something that size, mandibles spreading wide enough to fit a human torso. It landed where Azura had been standing, the impact cracking the stone floor, and its head swiveled with mechanical precision toward the nearest Drakai warrior. The warrior didn't stand a chance. The Skrell's limb punched through his chest armor like it was paper, then jerked sideways with enough force to split him open from sternum to hip. Chaos erupted. Drakai warriors charged with ritual war cries, their weapons raised in formal combat stances that looked impressive and would get them killed in under a minute. The Skrell moved through them like a harvester through wheat, each strike calculated for maximum damage. Dax saw Azura rise from where he'd shoved her, saw her draw twin blades that hummed with some kind of energy field, saw her move toward the creature with the confident grace of someone who'd never doubted she'd win. Then the Skrell's attention locked onto her. It charged faster than anything that size should move, scattering bodies as it came. Azura set her stance, blades raised to meet it in what was probably a traditional defensive position. Dax knew with absolute certainty that tradition was about to get her killed. He didn't think. Thinking got you dead. He moved, his body finding the angle through muscle memory and desperation, and hit the Skrell from the side as it reached Azura. The impact felt like running into a concrete wall wrapped in razor wire, but his momentum was enough to knock it off balance. The creature twisted with impossible speed, one bladed limb catching Dax across the ribs and sending him rolling across stone. His armor absorbed most of it, but he felt at least one rib crack. He came up spitting blood, his hand already pulling the combat knife from his boot. The Skrell loomed over him, mandibles spreading. Dax could see down its throat, see the ridges designed to tear flesh, smell the chemical stink of its breath. He smiled. It wasn't friendly. Come on, then. The creature lunged. Dax didn't dodge. He went forward, inside its reach, where those limbs couldn't gain enough momentum to kill him instantly. His knife found the gap between armor plates at its throat and sank deep, then again, then again. The Skrell thrashed, trying to throw him off, but Dax wrapped his legs around what passed for its neck and kept stabbing. Blood sprayed across his face, dark green and hot. The creature's movements became jerky, desperate. Dax found another gap, this one at the base of its skull, and drove the knife in up to the hilt. The Skrell collapsed. Dax rode it down, his chest heaving, his hands slick with alien blood. When it stopped moving, he pulled his knife free and stood on shaking legs. The room had gone silent. He turned and found Azura staring at him, her golden eyes wide, her blades still raised in that perfect defensive stance she'd never needed to use. Around them, the surviving Drakai warriors stood frozen, their expressions somewhere between shock and something that might have been fear. Dax wiped blood from his face with his sleeve, leaving a dark green smear across his jaw. Told you, he said, his voice rough. Most things that tried to kill me are dead. He walked past Azura toward the creature's corpse, kneeling to examine it despite the pain screaming through his ribs. There, at the base of the skull, partially buried in tissue. A control implant, still blinking with faint red light. Someone, Dax said quietly, not looking up, released this thing on purpose, which means your problem isn't the monsters. He finally met Azura's eyes, and this time there was no mockery in her gaze. Just fascinated uncertainty, like she was seeing him for the first time. Your problem is whoever's weaponizing them. Over the following days, Azura led reconnaissance missions into the ash wastes, while Dax shadowed her like something she couldn't shake. Always 10 feet behind, always scanning her. He could tell by the tension in her shoulders, the sharp glances she threw when she thought he wasn't looking. On the fourth day, they found another nest. Dax saw the drag marks first, massive gouges in the ash leading to a cave system. He grabbed Azura's arm without thinking. She looked down at his hand, then up at his face. Her expression could have melted steel. 3 of your warriors are about to die, Dax said, pointing. The Drakai were already approaching the cave, weapons raised. Azura opened her mouth to call them back, but the Skrell exploded from the darkness first, 2 of them moving in perfect synchronization. The first warrior died before he could scream. The second lost his head to a scything limb. Dax was already moving, rifle up, firing controlled bursts into armor gaps. One Skrell went down, the other charged him, and he dropped his weapon, shoving a frag grenade between its plates as it crashed into him. The explosion threw him 15 feet. He rolled, came up spitting blood. Azura stood frozen, her hand still raised in an unfinished command. She lowered it slowly, golden eyes fixed on him. "You saved one of my warriors," she said. 2 were already dead when I started shooting, Dax said, retrieving his rifle. That night, Dax sat alone at the camp's edge, cleaning his weapons. He heard her approach. Armor didn't make that kind of noise by accident. Azura lowered herself onto the rock beside him. Up close, he could see the scars marking her scales, the calluses where weapons had worn grooves into her clawed fingers. "Why do you fight the way you do?" Dax didn't look up. "What way is that?" "Like you have nothing to lose." He paused, hands stilling on his rifle. "Your people fight for glory, for honor, big ideas that sound good when you're not bleeding out. And humans? We fight to survive, which means no rules, no limits." He slid the bolt back with a click. "Your warriors are brave, but they fight the way they were taught. Teaching only gets you so far when something wants to rip your throat out." Azura tilted her head, studying him. "Show me." "What?" "Show me how a human fights." She stood, offering her hand. "Spar with me." Dax looked at her claws and laughed without humor. "You'll kill me." "Then fight like your life depends on it," Azura said, lips pulling back in something like a smile, "the way you always do." The camp formed a circle. Drakai warriors gathered to watch their chieftain humiliate the small human. Azura removed her armor, standing in form-fitting black material that showed every powerful line of her body. Even without armor, she was terrifying. "First blood," she said, "or surrender." Dax dropped into a loose stance. He'd fought bigger things before. Speed, leverage, and willingness to do the unexpected. That's what kept you breathing. Azura moved first, testing him with a punch that would have shattered ribs. Dax slipped it by inches and drove his elbow toward her kidney. She twisted impossibly fast, caught his arm, used his momentum to throw him. He hit the ground and rolled, came up moving because staying still meant dying. They circled. Azura's eyes gleamed predatory in the firelight. She feinted left, came in low for a grapple. Dax met her anyway, getting inside her reach where size mattered less. His knee found the nerve cluster on her inner thigh. Her leg buckled slightly, and he got behind her, arms snaking around her throat. Azura threw herself backward, slamming him into the ground. Air exploded from his lungs, but he held on, tightening his grip even as stars burst across his vision. She drove her elbow into his cracked ribs. Pain whited out everything, but his body remembered. "Hold on, keep pressure." Her hand found his face, claws scraping his cheek and drawing blood. He twisted away and bit down on her wrist, not hard enough to hurt through scales, but shocking enough that she hesitated. In that heartbeat, Dax hooked his leg around hers and rolled them. They came up tangled, both gasping, and he got his thumb pressed against the pressure point beneath her jaw. She could have broken him, should have. Instead, she went very still, golden eyes locked on his face inches away. Her breath came hot and sharp against his skin, carrying that cinnamon scent. Dax rasped. Azura's hand came up slowly, clawed fingers wrapping around his wrist. Not pulling away, just holding with surprising gentleness. "No," she said softly. Then she moved faster than he could track, and suddenly he was on his back with her straddling him, her hand pressed against his chest. He could feel his heart hammering against her palm. could see her pupils dilated until the gold was just a thin ring. "You fight well," Azura said, her voice lower, "for something so small." "You fight like you've never been desperate," Dax said, chest heaving. "And you fight like you've never been anything else." Neither moved. The camp disappeared around them. Dax became aware of the heat radiating from her body, the way her scales shimmered in firelight, her weight pressing him into volcanic sand. Azura's free hand came up, clawed finger tracing the fresh cut across his cheek. The touch was gentle, curious, making something twist in his chest. "First blood," she said quietly. "You win." She stood in one fluid motion, offering her hand. Dax took it, and she pulled him up with enough force that he stumbled into her. Her other hand caught his shoulder, steadying him. For a moment they were close enough that he could count individual scales on her throat. Then she released him and walked away, leaving Dax standing in the circle of watching warriors, his blood singing with something he didn't want to name. The next day, their convoy moved through a narrow canyon when Skrell attacked from above. Multiple creatures, coordinated and vicious. Dax and Azura fought side by side for the first time in sustained combat, his brutal pragmatism complementing her raw power. Their bodies moved together with instinctive rhythm that felt disturbingly natural. After, as Azura helped bind the gash across his ribs, her clawed fingers surprisingly gentle against scarred skin, Dax felt her body heat increase noticeably. She pulled away quickly, something like confusion crossing her face. Lieutenant Shera found him that evening. "Got something. The Skrell control implants, they're manufactured off-world. Someone with access to both our networks has been coordinating attacks specifically targeting Azura." Dax studied the schematics, mind-turning possibilities. Someone wants her dead. And they're willing to use biological weapons to do it. Before he could respond, horn sounded, deep and resonant. Incoming forces. General Corvin arrived with 20 elite warriors, their armor polished to mirror brightness. He dismounted from a transport that looked like a mobile throne, his crimson scales catching firelight as he approached Azura. They spoke in harsh syllables that carried across camp. Then Corvin switched to human standard, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "War Chieftain Azura, you dishonor our people by placing your life in the hands of this creature." His eyes found Dax. "I have evidence that Sergeant Harrow's mercenary company maintains contact with the faction weaponizing the Skrell. He is not your protector. He is your assassin." Azura's expression went carefully blank. "Show me." Corvin produced a data crystal. Communications, financial transfers, mission logs, all linking him to our enemies. Dax felt every eye turn toward him. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched Azura's face as Corvin's words sank in, watched doubt bloom in her golden eyes like poison. She met his gaze across the firelight, and Dax saw the exact moment she decided he might be a threat after all. Azura's quarters smelled of steel, and something organic Dax couldn't identify. She stood with her back to him, the data crystal Corvin had given her catching dim light on the table between them. "Tell me it's fabricated," she said without turning. Dax stood near the door, rifle against the wall behind him. "I can't tell you that." She turned, and the look in her golden eyes hit harder than any weapon. Not anger, betrayal, raw and bleeding. "So it's true. My company took contracts from a lot of sources. Some probably dealt with the same people who made those implants." Dax kept his voice flat. "Doesn't mean I'm here to kill you." Azura crossed the space in 3 strides. "Give me one reason I shouldn't tear your throat out right now." "Because if I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. I've had a dozen chances." Her hand shot out, claws wrapping around his throat and lifting him onto his toes. Not squeezing, just holding him with casual strength that could end him without effort. "I've watched you fight, watched you bleed." Her voice dropped. "I thought I knew what you were." "You do." Dax didn't struggle. "I'm exactly what you think, someone who's done terrible things and kept breathing when better people died, but I'm not your assassin." "Prove it?" Dax reached slowly into his vest and pulled his sidearm free, pressing it into her hand. "Do what you think is right, because I'm tired of trying to prove I'm not the monster everyone assumes." The weapon's weight seemed to surprise her, Azura's grip loosened slightly, confusion flickering across her face. You would let me kill you? If you believe I'm here to hurt you, yeah, better that than watching you second-guess every shadow until a real threat slips through. Neither moved. Dax could feel his pulse hammering against her palm, then Azura released him, letting the weapon drop between them. I want to believe you, she said, vulnerability in her voice worse than accusation. But Corvin's evidence is probably real and probably meaningless. Dax rubbed his throat, feeling the indent her claws left. Someone smart enough to weaponize Skrell can build a paper trail pointing at a scapegoat. You're asking me to trust my instincts. I'm not asking anything. You're the war chieftain. Make whatever call keeps your people safe. Azura studied him, something shifting in her expression. My people have a saying, actions speak where words drown. You have bled for me, nearly died for me. Her hand came up, fingers brushing the scars on his face where her claws had marked him. Why would you do that if you intended betrayal? Maybe I'm playing a long game. No. Her touch lingered, gentle. You fight like someone who doesn't expect tomorrow. That's not patience. She stepped back, decision settling like armor. You're confined to quarters until I verify Corvin's evidence. Figured as much. Dax, she said his name like testing its weight. If you are what you claim, I will not forget. And if you're not, I will kill you myself. Sounds fair. The quarters they locked him in were barely large enough to pace. By the second hour, Dax sat against the wall, rifle disassembled before him, cleaning parts he'd already cleaned twice. He heard the attack before alarms sounded, vibration through walls, then screaming, the kind that came from people dying badly. Dax was on his feet, rifle reassembled. The guard outside stumbled backward, armor torn and smoking, blood pouring from a wound, showing bone. Skrell breached command center. Dax caught him as he collapsed. How many? Too many. The corridors were chaos. Dax took a shortcut through the vehicle bay, vaulting transports. A Skrell dropped from the ceiling in his path. He slid under its strike, came up inside its reach, drove his knife through soft tissue under its jaw. The creature spasmed. Dax rode it down, pulled his knife free, kept running. The command center's doors had been torn open. Inside, emergency lighting painted everything red. Bodies littered the floor, human and Drakai both. At the center, Azura fought beside Corvin and 3 warriors against 5 Skrell. She fought magnificently, all power and precision, but Dax could see she was tiring. Blood streaked her armor. Then he saw it, the Alpha. Twice the size of the others, armored in grafted plates. It came through the far wall like cardboard, limbs ending in serrated edges, humming with energy. It targeted Azura specifically. Dax didn't think. He ran, launched himself at the creature's back. His knife found gaps between armor plates and sank deep. The Alpha twisted impossibly fast, and a humming limb caught him across the ribs. Pain exploded through his chest. Something cracked, more than one rib. Dax's vision grayed, but his hands kept moving, kept stabbing, finding weak points through muscle memory and desperation. The Alpha bucked, trying to throw him. Dax wrapped his legs around its neck and drove his knife in again and again, until his arm burned and the creature's movements became jerky. He heard Azura shouting in her language, felt her move into position. Then her blade punched through the Alpha's skull from below. Everything went still. Dax fell more than climbed down, legs giving out. The world tilted. Someone caught him, scaled hands supporting him with impossible gentleness. You broke confinement, Azura said, voice underwater distant. You were in danger. Dax's mouth tasted copper. Seemed relevant. You're bleeding. Yeah, that happens. Her face swam above him, golden eyes wide searching his face. Why do you keep doing this? Doing what? Destroying yourself for me. Dax tried to laugh. It came out as a cough that made his ribs scream. Because someone has to. Everyone else is too smart. Dax, check Corvin's pockets. Data chip, communications, he's the one. The world grayed out. The last thing Dax felt was Azura's arms around him, cradling him against armored plates that should have been cold but weren't, and her voice whispering something his dying brain translated as, "Please don't leave me." When awareness returned, it came in fragments. White ceiling, chemical smell, pain radiating through his chest with every breath, the steady beep of medical equipment. Azura sat beside his bed, still in blood-stained armor, her hand carefully holding his scarred, bandaged one. She wasn't looking at him. Her golden eyes were fixed on something beyond the walls, her expression distant. "How long?" Dax's voice came out rough as gravel. Her head snapped toward him, relief and something fiercer flooding her face. 3 days. They said you might not wake." "Takes more than that." He tried to sit up. Pain whited out his vision, and Azura's hand pressed gently against his shoulder, keeping him down. "You have 4 broken ribs, internal bleeding they had to repair twice, and enough damage that human medics wanted to put you in stasis." Her voice carried an edge he couldn't identify. "You nearly died." "But I didn't. Because you're too stubborn." Her clawed thumb traced circles on the back of his hand, the gesture unconscious, or too foolish. "Found the data chip?" "In Corvin's personal quarters. Communications with the faction manufacturing the implants, payment transfers, tactical data showing every attack coordinated to eliminate me while framing you." Her jaw clenched. "He wanted control of the Drakai forces. Thought without me, he could seize command and dissolve the human alliance." "Where is he now?" "In chains, awaiting trial." Azura's eyes met his, something vulnerable breaking through her warrior's mask. "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For doubting you, for believing manufactured evidence over what I knew." Her hand tightened on his. "My people have a ritual. When 2 warriors prove themselves in blood and fire, they become battle-bonded, bound by shared survival and trust earned through sacrifice." Dax's chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with his injuries. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you are the most terrifying and remarkable being I have ever encountered." Azura leaned forward, pressing her forehead gently against his, a gesture that sent heat cascading through his body despite the pain. "And that I was wrong about humans. I was wrong about you." "Azura, rest now." She pulled back slightly, but didn't release his hand. "We'll finish this conversation when you're not bleeding internally." Dax wanted to argue. Instead, exhaustion pulled him under, and the last thing he felt was her thumb still tracing gentle circles on his skin. The medics cleared Dax for light duty after 2 weeks. He interpreted that as full duty and found Azura in the tactical center, surrounded by holographic displays showing terrain and force deployments. "You should be resting," she said without looking up. "I've been resting." Dax studied the tactical layout. "What's the plan?" "The facility is built into volcanic tunnels 20 kilometers east. Heavy fortification, automated defenses, at least a dozen Alpha-class Skrell." Her clawed finger traced approach vectors. "We hit it before they can release the creatures or destroy evidence." "When do we move?" Her eyes found his, searching. "You can barely stand." "I'm going. Assign me to your team or I'll follow anyway." Her lips curved slightly. "You are infuriating." "Yeah, I get that a lot." The assault force moved out at dawn. Dax rode in Azura's transport, checking his gear despite ribs that screamed with every deep breath. Lieutenant Shara sat across from him, expression skeptical. "You look like death." "I've looked worse." The facility entrance was reinforced bunker built into volcanic rock. Azura's engineers placed shaped charges while snipers took position. The charges blew with ground-shaking force. The strike team poured through, weapons ready. Automated turrets emerged from concealed positions. Dax dropped behind cover as rounds chewed the air. Azura moved like liquid violence, tearing the first turret from its mounting and using it as a shield. Dax provided covering fire, shots precise despite the pain. They pushed deeper, fighting through narrow corridors. The walls were lined with observation windows, and behind them, Skrell paced with mechanical precision. "Plant charges on the cell doors," Azura ordered. "We're sealing them permanently." The control center was at the facility's heart, protected by blast doors and every remaining guard the conspirators could muster. The firefight was brutal and close. Dax took a round to his vest that knocked him backward. Before he could recover, a guard closed distance, blade raised. Azura appeared, her hand closing around the guard's throat. The crack echoed in the narrow space. She pulled Dax to his feet, eyes scanning for injuries. "Are you—" "Fine, keep moving." They breached the control center to find it evacuated but communication logs intact. Shara started downloading while the team set charges. Then alarms started, something deeper, more organic, dozens of heavy locks disengaging. They remotely triggered the release protocol, Shara said, face pale. Every cell just opened. Azura's expression went cold. Fall back to the entrance, fighting formation. They came in a wave, at least 20 alphas, along with smaller Skrell moving with pack coordination. The narrow corridors became a killing ground with no room to maneuver. Dax fought shoulder to shoulder with Azura, their movements synchronized. When she advanced, he covered her blind spots. When he reloaded, she stepped into the gap. They'd become a single weapon with two bodies. His ammunition ran dry. Dax dropped his rifle and pulled his knife, meeting a Skrell charge because falling back would expose Azura's flank. The creature's limb caught his already damaged ribs. Something broke. He went down hard, knife spinning away. The Skrell loomed, mandibles spreading. Then Azura was there, her blade punching through its skull with enough force to pin it to the wall. She didn't stop. Stopping meant dying. But her hand found his as she passed, hauling him up with casual strength, and he felt the squeeze of her fingers before she released him and engaged the next threat. They fought for what felt like hours. When the last Skrell fell, the corridor was painted in blood and ichor. Dax leaned against the wall, every breath agony, watching Azura stand among carnage with dented armor and blood-streaked scales, thinking she'd never looked more magnificent. "Charges are set," Shara called. 2 minutes. The extraction was chaos, running through unstable tunnels while explosions chased them. Dax's legs gave out halfway. Without a word, Azura scooped him up and kept running. They cleared the blast radius with seconds to spare. The facility collapsed inward, volcanic rock swallowing all evidence. Dax sat in the ash, vision swimming, watching smoke rise. Azura knelt beside him, hand finding his face. "You're done fighting for today." "Probably for a while," Dax admitted, then coughed. Blood speckled his lips. Her expression shifted to something fierce. "You're going to medical now." "In a minute." He caught her hand, holding it against his face. "Just let me sit here with you." Azura studied him, then lowered herself beside him in the ash. Her arm went around his shoulders, supporting him when he started to list sideways, and they watched the smoke together. Months later, the war had moved to other fronts. Dax stood on a cliff overlooking Ashfall Reach, the wasteland looking almost peaceful in evening light. He heard her approach. She still made sound when she wanted him to know. Azura stopped beside him, hand settling on his shoulder with casual possessiveness. The gesture had become natural, along with a dozen other small intimacies. "My people have a new saying," she said, voice carrying amused warmth. "They say size means nothing when measured against the ferocity of someone willing to tear the world apart for those they love." Dax turned to face her. "That's quite a saying. We're not known for brevity." Her hand slid to his chest, fingers splaying over his heart. "But we honor truth, and the truth is you terrify me, Dax Harrow." "I terrify you? You made me question everything I believed about strength, honor, what it means to fight for something that matters." Her golden eyes held his, unguarded. "You made me believe humans are capable of ferocity, rivaling anything my people have known." "Is that a compliment?" "It's an admission." Azura stepped closer, other hand finding his face, thumb tracing the scars she'd given him. "In Drakhai culture, battle bonds are sacred, not formed lightly, never broken." Dax's heart hammered against her palm. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're mine if you'll have me." Her lips curved in a smile showing teeth and warmth. "Despite your terrible survival instincts and habit of nearly dying to protect me." Dax reached up, scarred hand covering hers. "You know I'm still just a human, still small. Still the most dangerous thing I've ever encountered when someone threatens what you love." Azura leaned down, forehead pressing against his in that gesture of intimacy that meant everything in her culture. "Still worth dying for, which makes you worth living for, too." "That sounds about right," Dax said, voice rough with emotion he'd stopped hiding. She kissed him then, careful and fierce and tender all at once, her claws gentle against his skin, her mouth tasting like cinnamon and heat. When she pulled back, Her eyes searched his face with an expression that made his breath catch. "Come home with me," Azura said softly. "Not as my guard, as my partner, my equal." Dax smiled genuinely for the first time in years. "Yeah, I can do that." They stood together on the cliff as the sun set over Ashfall Reach, two warriors who'd found something stronger than combat, more enduring than duty. When Azura's hand found his again, fingers intertwining with practiced ease, Dax knew he'd finally found the one thing that had always eluded him. A reason to survive that had nothing to do with violence and everything to do with love.